The emerald green water bubbled like a witch's cauldron, releasing fumes that made the roses wilt overnight. Karen Whitmore stood frozen at her pool's edge, watching something she'd never seen before, her crystal-clear paradise transforming into a toxic nightmare. What she didn't know was that her neighbor Marcus had been planning this moment for 3 years, ever since she'd stolen what was rightfully his. The pipeline she'd tapped into wasn't just water, it was revenge, served ice-cold through copper pipes, and the chemical reaction brewing in her backyard was about to expose secrets that would the sound of Karen Whitmore's heels clicking against the pristine concrete echoed through the morning air as she surveyed her domain. Willowbrook Estate stretched before her like a monument to suburban perfection, manicured lawns, identical mailboxes, and houses that whispered prosperity through every shuttered window. But Karen's property stood apart, a crown jewel that made the other homes look like peasant cottages. Her pool sparkled like a sapphire in the morning sun, its infinity edge creating the illusion that the water flowed directly into the sky. The surrounding deck featured hand-laid Italian travertine, each stone personally selected during her trip to Tuscany last spring. Imported palm trees swayed gently in the breeze, their fronds casting dancing shadows across the water surface. "Another perfect morning in paradise," Karen murmured, adjusting her designer sunglasses. At 42, she maintained the kind of polished appearance that required significant investment, weekly spa treatments, monthly Botox appointments, and a personal trainer who charged more per hour than most people made in a day. Her blonde hair caught the sunlight just right, styled in loose waves that looked effortless but required 2 hours and $300 every Friday. The pool's filtration system hummed quietly in the background, a sound that had become as comforting as a lullaby. Karen had spared no expense on the equipment, German-engineered pumps, a state-of-the-art UV sanitization system, and temperature controls that could maintain perfect conditions regardless of weather. The water bill alone exceeded most families' monthly mortgage payments, but Karen considered it a small price for perfection. She was admiring the way the morning light danced across the water when her phone buzzed. The caller ID showed her lawyer's name, and Karen's perfectly glossed lips curved into a satisfied smile. "Robert, please tell me you have good news," she said, settling into her custom-made chaise lounge. The zoning appeal was denied, Robert Henderson's voice crackled through the speaker. The city council voted unanimously. Marcus Chen's plans for the community center are officially dead. Karen's smile widened. Permanently. The land is now classified as residential only. No commercial or community development will be permitted for at least 10 years. Your generous contributions to the council members' campaign funds proved quite persuasive. 3 years of careful planning had led to this moment. When Marcus Chen had first announced his intentions to build a community center on the empty lot behind their neighborhood, Karen had seen it as a direct threat to her property values. A community center meant noise, traffic, and the wrong sort of people in her perfect neighborhood. But more importantly, it meant competition for the underground aquifer that supplied her pool's elaborate water features. "What about the water rights?" Karen asked, though she already knew the answer. "Yours exclusively. The city has approved your request to tap into the main aquifer line. Construction can begin next week." Karen had done her research. The aquifer beneath Willowbrook Estates was fed by a natural spring system that had been flowing for thousands of years. The city had originally planned to split the water rights between residential and community use, but Karen's influence had shifted those plans dramatically. Now, all that pristine spring water would flow directly to her property, feeding not just her pool but the elaborate fountain system she'd been planning for months. As she ended the call, Karen noticed movement in the yard next door. Marcus Chen stood in his garden, tending to a small vegetable patch with the same careful attention most people reserved for precious artwork. At 55, Marcus carried himself with the quiet dignity of someone who'd built his success through hard work rather than inheritance. His hands, weathered from years of carpentry before his construction company took off, moved gently among the tomato plants. Karen had never understood why someone of Marcus's means chose to live so simply. His house was well-maintained but modest, his car reliable but unremarkable. He spent his evenings reading on his back porch and his weekends working in his garden or volunteering at the local food bank. It was the kind of authentic lifestyle that made Karen inexplicably uncomfortable. The community center had been Marcus's dream project, a place where neighborhood kids could learn trades, where seniors could gather for meals, where families could access resources they couldn't afford elsewhere. He'd spent 2 years navigating permits and regulations, investing his own money into architectural plans and environmental surveys. The project would have been his legacy, a gift to the community that had supported his business for decades. Karen watched him discover the construction notice she'd had posted on the empty lot that morning. The bright yellow sign announced the upcoming installation of a private water line, complete with detailed diagrams showing how the pipeline would run directly through the center of his planned building site. Marcus stood perfectly still for a long moment, reading the notice with the careful attention of someone who understood that his world had just shifted. When he finally looked up, his eyes found Karen's across the yard. She didn't look away. "Good morning, Marcus," Karen called out, her voice carrying the artificial sweetness she'd perfected over years of homeowners association meetings. "Lovely day, isn't it?" Marcus walked to the fence that separated their properties. Up close, Karen could see the deep lines around his eyes, the way his shoulders had slumped slightly as he'd read the notice. For a moment, she almost felt a flicker of something that might have been guilt. "Karen, I need to ask you something," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the obvious strain. "Did you know about the community center project when you applied for those water rights?" Karen's smile never wavered. "I'm not sure what you mean. The aquifer feeds the entire block. If you tap into the main line, there won't be enough water pressure for the community center's kitchen and bathrooms. The health department will never approve the permits." "I'm sorry, Marcus, but I don't see how that's my problem. The water rights are mine legally. I went through all the proper channels." Marcus's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Those proper channels included campaign contributions to 3 city council members who voted on my permits." "Interesting timing." Karen's carefully maintained composure cracked slightly. "I resent your implication. I'm simply a concerned citizen who believes in supporting local government. A concerned citizen who somehow knew exactly which officials to support and exactly how much they needed for their campaigns." The accusation hung in the air between them like a challenge. Karen felt her heart rate increase, but she'd learned long ago that the best defense was a good offense. "Marcus, I understand you're disappointed about your little project, but surely you can see that a community center would be completely inappropriate for this neighborhood. The traffic alone would be a nightmare, not to mention the noise and the clientele it would attract." "You mean people who can't afford to live here?" "I mean people who don't belong here." The words came out more honestly than Karen had intended. Marcus studied her face for a long moment, and she had the uncomfortable feeling that he could see straight through her perfectly applied makeup to something ugly underneath. "I've lived in this neighborhood for 15 years, Marcus said quietly. "I've helped build half the houses on this street. I've watched kids grow up here, watched families struggle and succeed. I belonged here long before you bought your way in." Karen's cheeks flushed with anger. "I earned my place here just like everyone else. You inherited your place here. Your ex-husband's family trust bought this house. Your family money paid for that pool. The only thing you've earned is a reputation for destroying anything that doesn't serve your immediate interests." The attack was so unexpected and so accurate that Karen felt momentarily speechless. Marcus had never spoken to her with anything but polite civility, even when she'd complained about his unsightly vegetable garden or objected to his practice of letting neighborhood kids pick fruit from his orange trees. "How dare you," Karen managed finally. "You don't know anything about my life." "I know enough. I know that community center would have employed 20 people from this neighborhood. I know it would have provided after-school programs for kids whose parents work 2 jobs. I know it would have offered free tax preparation and job training for people who need it. And I know you destroyed it because you couldn't stand the thought of sharing your perfect little world with anyone who might need help." Karen stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the travertine. "This conversation is over." "Yes, it is," Marcus agreed. "But this situation isn't. You may have won this battle, Karen, but you've started a war you are." The emergency pool service arrived at 6:47 a.m., 23 minutes after Karen's panicked phone call. She'd offered to pay triple rates for immediate service, her voice cracking with desperation as she described the mysterious contamination that was destroying her prized possession. Rick Morales had been cleaning pools for 15 years, and he'd never seen anything like what greeted him in Karen Whitmore's backyard. The water had progressed from a faint green tint to a deep emerald that seemed to pulse with its own internal light. Worse, it was beginning to foam, not the harmless bubbles of an overactive spa system, but thick, viscous foam that clung to the pool's edges like soap scum. Jesus Christ, Rick muttered, kneeling beside the pool's edge. He dipped his testing kit into the water and immediately recoiled. The liquid that came up was warm to the touch, almost hot, and it left a residue on his equipment that shimmered like oil. Karen paced behind him, her perfectly styled hair disheveled from a sleepless night. She'd changed from her silk nightgown into designer jeans and a cashmere sweater, but the expensive clothes couldn't hide the wild look in her eyes. "Can you fix it?" she demanded. "I'm having a pool party tomorrow night. The entire Homeowners Association board will be here, plus the mayor's wife. This has to be perfect." Rick stood slowly, his knees creaking. I don't think you understand what you're dealing with here. This isn't algae or bacteria. This is some kind of chemical reaction. The water's temperature has increased by 12 degrees overnight, and the pH levels are..." He consulted his tablet. "Well, they are not registering at all. My equipment can't read whatever's in there." "Then get different equipment," Karen snapped. "I don't care what it costs. I'll pay for whatever you need." Rick had dealt with demanding clients before, but there was something unsettling about Karen's intensity. Her hands shook as she spoke, and her eyes darted constantly between the pool and the neighboring yards, as if she expected someone to be watching. "I think you need to call the city water department. And maybe the EPA. This isn't a maintenance issue, this is a hazmat situation." Karen's face went pale. "Absolutely not. No government agencies. This is a private matter." "Private matter?" Rick gestured at the pool, where the green water had begun to bubble more violently. "Lady, if this stuff is toxic, it could affect the whole neighborhood. The groundwater, the soil, other people's wells." "I said no." Karen's voice cracked like a whip. "I'll double your fee. Triple it. Just fix this quietly." Rick shook his head. "I'm sorry, but I can't help you. And I need to report this to the health department. It's the law." Karen's carefully maintained composure finally shattered. "You work for me. I'm paying you to solve problems, not create them." "I work for the safety of this community," Rick replied calmly. "And right now, your pool is a danger to everyone in a half-mile radius." As Rick packed his equipment, Karen's phone buzzed with a text from the same unknown number. "The chemistry is just getting started. Check your roses." A concerned neighbor. Karen's blood ran cold. She'd been so focused on the pool that she hadn't noticed the landscaping around it. Now, as she followed the text suggestion, she saw that her prize-winning rose garden was wilting. The flowers that had taken 3 years to cultivate, imported from a specialty nursery in Oregon, were browning at the edges. Their leaves curled inward as if trying to protect themselves from something in the air. But it wasn't just the roses. The Italian cypress trees that bordered her property were showing signs of stress, their needles yellowing from the bottom up. Even the grass around the pool deck was beginning to turn brown in perfect circles, as if something was radiating outward from the water itself. Karen grabbed her phone and called her landscaper, then her pool contractor, then her lawyer. Each conversation was more frustrating than the last. The landscaper refused to work until the chemical contamination was identified. The pool contractor suggested draining the entire system and starting over, a process that would take weeks and cost more than a new car. Her lawyer was blunt: if government agencies got involved, Karen's legal troubles would multiply exponentially. By noon, Karen was sitting on her deck, staring at the pool that had become her nemesis. The water was now a deep jade color, and the foam had thickened to the consistency of shaving cream. Worse, it was beginning to smell, not the pleasant ozone scent of properly treated water, but something organic and earthy, like mushrooms growing in a damp basement. She was so absorbed in her crisis that she didn't notice Marcus Chen approaching until he spoke. "Quite a transformation," he said quietly. Karen spun around to find him standing at the fence line, his expression unreadable. Today he wore work clothes, faded jeans and a flannel shirt that had seen better days. His hands were dirty from gardening and there was something almost serene about his posture. "This is your doing," Karen said, her voice hoarse from hours of phone calls. "I don't know how, but you're behind this." Marcus studied the pull for a long moment. "I warned you that you'd started a war you weren't prepared to fight." "How did you do it? What did you put in my water?" "I didn't put anything in your water, Karen. I simply connected you to the source you were so determined to own." Karen's mind raced. "The monitoring station. You're not just monitoring the water, you're treating it somehow." Marcus smiled. But there was no warmth in it. "I'm not treating it. I'm just removing the treatments that were keeping it artificial." "What does that mean?" "It means your perfect pull was never as perfect as you thought. The aquifer you tapped into has been contaminated for decades. Industrial runoff from the old textile plant, agricultural chemicals from the farms upstream, heavy metals from mining operations. The city's been quietly filtering it for residential use, but your private line bypasses all those safeguards." Karen felt the blood drain from her face. "You're lying." "Am I? When did you last see the environmental impact report for your water rights application? The one that detailed exactly what's in that pristine spring water you were so eager to own." Karen's throat tightened. She'd never seen an environmental report. Robert had handled all the paperwork, and she'd been too focused on outmaneuvering Marcus to worry about technical details. "The monitoring station isn't treating your water," Marcus continued. "It's just measuring what was already there. But when you started pulling water at triple the normal rate, you overwhelmed the natural filtration process. All those chemicals that were safely dispersed in the groundwater are now concentrated in your pool." "But the city approved my water rights." "The city approved them based on the assumption that you'd be using normal residential amounts. Nobody anticipated that you'd be pulling enough water to fill a municipal swimming pool twice a week." Karen's legs felt weak. She sank into her chair, staring at the toxic green water that had once been her pride and joy. "What's going to happen to me?" "That depends on how quickly the contamination spreads. The chemicals in your pool are evaporating into the air, settling on your plants, soaking into the ground. In about 48 hours, the whole neighborhood will start to notice. You have to help me fix this." Marcus laughed, but it was a bitter sound. "Help you? Karen, do you have any idea what you've done? Not just to me, but to this entire community. I was protecting property values. You were protecting your own comfort at the expense of everyone else's future. That community center would have employed local people, provided services for families who needed them, created a space where kids could learn and grow. Instead, you turned it into a toxic waste site." Karen's phone buzzed again. This time it was her next-door neighbor, Helen Morrison, calling to complain about a strange smell coming from Karen's backyard. Karen let the call go to voicemail. But the message was clear, the problem was spreading. "What do you want from me?" Karen asked desperately. Marcus considered the question for a long moment. "I want you to understand that actions have consequences. I want you to feel what it's like to watch something you've worked for be destroyed by someone else's selfishness. I want you to know that your perfect little world was built on a foundation of poison. But you're destroying the whole neighborhood." "No, Karen. You are. I'm just making sure everyone knows it." As if summoned by their conversation, Helen Morrison appeared at Karen's gate, her face flushed with indignation. Helen was 73, a retired teacher who'd moved to Willowbrook Estates after her husband's death. She'd been one of Karen's few allies on the Homeowners Association board, mainly because she appreciated Karen's commitment to maintaining property values. "Karen, dear, I need to speak with you about that awful smell," Helen called out. "It's getting into my house through the windows. And my cat won't stop sneezing." Karen forced a smile. "Just a minor pool maintenance issue, Helen. It'll be resolved soon." Helen's expression darkened as she got closer to the pool. Good heavens! What happened to your water? It looks like swamp water. It's just algae, Karen lied. The filtration system is being upgraded. But Helen wasn't buying it. As a former science teacher, she'd seen enough chemical reactions to recognize one when it was happening. Karen, this isn't algae. This is some kind of contamination. Are you sure it's safe? Before Karen could answer, Marcus spoke up. It's not safe at all. The wait. Karen woke to the sound of sirens. The first fire truck arrived at 5:23 a.m., followed by an ambulance, then a hazmat team in full protective gear. By the time Karen stumbled outside in her robe, half the neighborhood had gathered on the street, pointing at her house and speaking in hushed, urgent tones. The pool had changed overnight. What had been an eerie green glow in the darkness was now a writhing mass of bioluminescent liquid that seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. Tendrils of vapor rose from the surface, creating a low-hanging fog that drifted across her deck and into the surrounding yards. But the pool wasn't the only problem. The contamination had spread. Helen Morrison's prized rose garden, which bordered Karen's property, was completely dead. The plants hadn't just wilted, they'd turned black, as if burned from within. The grass between the two properties formed a perfect line of demarcation, green and healthy on one side, brown and brittle on the other. More disturbing were the reports that had prompted the emergency response. 3 cats from neighboring houses had been found dead in Karen's backyard, their bodies arranged in a neat row near the pool's edge. The animals showed no signs of injury, but their eyes had turned the same eerie green as the water. I need you to step back, said the hazmat team leader, his voice muffled by his protective mask. This entire area is now a contamination zone. Karen's lawyer, Robert Henderson, pushed through the crowd with the harried look of someone who'd been awakened by crisis calls. His usually immaculate appearance was disheveled, and his eyes held the wild look of a man watching his career implode. Karen, don't say anything to anyone, he warned. The EPA is on their way, and there's already talk of criminal charges. Criminal charges? Karen's voice cracked. For what? Illegal dumping, environmental destruction, public endangerment, take your pick. The city's bringing in specialists from the state environmental lab. If they find evidence of deliberate contamination. Robert's words were cut off by the arrival of Channel 7's news van, followed closely by competitors from every other local station. The story had gone beyond neighborhood gossip, it was now a full-scale environmental disaster, unfolding in real time. Karen watched in horror as reporters set up their equipment, their camera operators focusing on her transformed pool with the hungry intensity of vultures. The morning show producers had clearly realized they had a perfect storm of scandal, wealthy privilege, environmental destruction, and a mystery that was still unfolding. This is Rebecca Martinez reporting live from Willowbrook Estates, the Channel 7 anchor announced, where a toxic contamination has transformed a luxury swimming pool into what experts are calling an environmental nightmare. 3 pets are dead. Dozens of residents have been evacuated, and the source of the contamination remains unknown. Unknown. Karen almost laughed at the irony. The source wasn't unknown, it was her own greed and Marcus Chen's methodical revenge. But explaining that would require admitting to a level of legal and ethical manipulation that would destroy what remained of her reputation. She was about to retreat into her house when she noticed Marcus standing at the edge of the crowd, his expression unreadable. Unlike everyone else, he wasn't staring at the pool or the hazmat team. He was watching her, and there was something in his eyes that made Karen's stomach clench with dread. Marcus approached slowly, ignoring the reporters, who tried to intercept him. When he reached Karen, he spoke quietly, his words meant for her alone. "This isn't what I intended," he said. "What do you mean?" "The contamination was supposed to be contained to your pool. The monitoring station was designed to neutralize the chemicals gradually, not concentrate them. Something went wrong." Karen felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. What kind of wrong? Marcus glanced at the hazmat team, who were taking readings near the pool's edge. Their equipment was emitting a steady stream of warning beeps. The chemical mixture in your pool has created something new. Something that's not responding to normal neutralization protocols. You're saying it's alive. I'm saying it's evolving. The industrial chemicals, the heavy metals, the organic compounds from the groundwater, they've formed some kind of synthetic ecosystem. It's feeding on itself, growing stronger. Karen's knees felt weak. How do we stop it? I don't know if we can. The monitoring station was designed to handle known contaminants, not this. Before Karen could respond, her phone rang. The caller ID showed her sister's number, and Karen realized with growing horror that the news coverage was spreading beyond the local market. Karen, I'm watching the news, her sister's voice was tight with concern. They are saying there's been some kind of chemical explosion at your house. Are you okay? I'm fine, Karen lied. It's just a pool maintenance issue. Pool maintenance? Karen, they are showing pictures of dead animals and people in hazmat suits. What the hell is going on? Karen couldn't answer. The truth was too complex, too shameful to explain over the phone. Instead, she hung up and watched as more emergency vehicles arrived, their flashing lights creating a surreal disco atmosphere in the morning sun. Dr. Sarah Chen, no relation to Marcus, despite the shared surname, arrived with the state environmental team at 8 a.m. She was a small woman with steel-gray hair and the kind of intense focus that comes from years of studying disasters. Her preliminary examination of the pool took less than 20 minutes, but her conclusions were devastating. I've never seen anything like this, she announced to the assembled officials. The water contains a complex mixture of industrial solvents, heavy metals and organic compounds that appear to be undergoing some kind of catalytic reaction. The bioluminescence suggests bacterial activity, but the chemical composition should be toxic to all known microorganisms. What does that mean? In plain English, asked Fire Chief Martinez. It means we are dealing with a completely new form of contamination. Something that's creating its own ecosystem, possibly through synthetic biology. The phrase synthetic biology sent a murmur through the crowd. Karen didn't fully understand what it meant, but she knew it sounded serious enough to escalate her legal troubles into federal territory. By noon, the contamination had spread to 3 more properties. The vapors rising from Karen's pool had settled on neighboring yards, killing vegetation and creating dead zones in perfect circles around each point of contact. The pattern was so regular, so geometric, that it looked almost intentional. More disturbing were the reports of animals being drawn to the affected areas. Dogs pulled their owners toward the dead zones, cats gathered at the edges of the contaminated grass, and birds circled overhead in tight spirals. The animals showed no signs of distress, if anything, they seemed mesmerized by whatever was happening to the environment. Karen stood at her kitchen window, watching the chaos unfold in her backyard. The hazmat team had cordoned off the entire pool area, and their equipment readings were growing more alarming by the hour. The bioluminescent glow that had been confined to the pool was now visible in the soil around it, as if the contamination was spreading through the ground itself. Her phone hadn't stopped ringing. Reporters, lawyers, government officials, and neighbors all wanted answers she didn't have. The story was trending on social media, with hashtags like #ToxicPool and #Willowbrook disaster spreading faster than the contamination itself. But it was the call from her insurance company that truly terrified her. Ms. Whitmore, I'm calling to inform you that your homeowner's policy specifically excludes coverage for environmental contamination caused by the policyholder's actions, the agent explained with professional courtesy. Based on the preliminary reports, your claim will be denied. What does that mean? It means you're financially responsible for all cleanup costs, property damage, and potential lawsuits. Given the scope of the contamination, we are talking about millions of dollars. Karen ended the call and sank into a kitchen chair, the weight of her situation finally hitting her. She'd lost her pool, her garden, her reputation, and possibly her entire fortune. But worse than the financial disaster was the growing realization that she'd created something genuinely dangerous, something that was threatening people she'd lived among for years. The afternoon brought a new crisis. Helen Morrison, the elderly neighbor who'd been one of Karen's few allies, collapsed while working in her garden. The paramedics found her unconscious near the fence line, her breathing shallow and her skin showing signs of chemical exposure. As the ambulance rushed Helen to the hospital, Karen felt the last of her emotional defenses crumble. This wasn't just about property values or neighborhood politics anymore. Real people were being hurt by her actions and she was powerless to stop it. Marcus found her sitting on her front steps, staring at the emergency vehicles with empty eyes. He sat down beside her without invitation, his presence oddly comforting despite everything that had happened between them. "Helen's going to be okay," he said quietly. "The doctors think she just inhaled too much of the vapor. She'll recover." "This is my fault," Karen whispered. "All of it." "Yes, it is. But wallowing in guilt won't fix anything." Karen turned to look at him, surprised by his bluntness. "What do you want me to do? I can't undo what I've done. I can't bring back those cats or poison the water or rebuild your community scent." Karen was jolted awake by the sound of loudspeakers moving through the neighborhood, their metallic voices cutting through the darkness. "Attention residents of Willowbrook Estates. By order of the State Environmental Emergency Response Team. You have 1 hour to evacuate your homes. This is not a drill." Through her bedroom window, Karen could see the reason for the panic. The bioluminescent contamination had broken free from her backyard during the night, spreading in perfect geometric patterns across the neighborhood like a living circuit board. Streets that had been normal just hours ago now glowed with an otherworldly green light, and the contaminated areas pulsed with a rhythm that seemed almost like breathing. But it wasn't just the visual transformation that had triggered the emergency response. The organism, for that's what Dr. Chen was now calling it, had begun actively hunting. Karen's doorbell rang at 3:45 a.m. She found Marcus on her front step, his truck loaded with equipment and his expression grim with purpose. "We need to leave," he said without preamble. "But first, I need your help with something." "Help with what?" "The whole neighborhood is being evacuated." Marcus pointed toward his house, where a large piece of machinery hummed quietly in his driveway. "The monitoring station has been recording everything: temperature changes, chemical compositions, growth patterns. If we can get that data to the CDC before we evacuate, they might be able to find a way to stop this." Karen stared at the machine that had started this entire nightmare. "That thing caused all of this." "No, Karen. Your greed caused this. The monitoring station just exposed what was already there. But now it's our only hope of understanding what we are dealing with." As if responding to their conversation, the contamination in Karen's backyard suddenly flared brighter. The bioluminescent patterns began moving faster, and for the first time, Karen could hear something, a low humming sound that seemed to come from the ground itself. "It's listening to us," she whispered. Marcus nodded grimly. "It's been learning human speech patterns for 3 days. Dr. Chen thinks it might be developing linguistic comprehension." The implications of that statement hit Karen like a physical blow. Not only had her actions created a living environmental disaster, but that disaster was now intelligent enough to understand their conversations. As they hurried toward Marcus's house, Karen noticed other disturbing changes in the neighborhood. The street lights had begun flickering in synchronized patterns, as if the organism was experimenting with the electrical grid. Several houses showed signs of structural stress: windows cracked in perfect geometric patterns, paint peeling in spirals, foundation stones shifting to create new configurations. But most unsettling were the animals. Dozens of neighborhood pets had gathered at the edges of the contaminated zones, sitting in perfect rows like an audience watching a performance. Their eyes reflected the green light of the organism, and they remained absolutely still, as if waiting for instructions. "The contamination is affecting their nervous systems," Marcus explained as they reached his driveway. "It's not killing them, it's recruiting them." The monitoring station was larger up close than Karen had realized, a sophisticated array of sensors and computers that had been recording every aspect of the contamination's growth. Marcus began downloading the data while explaining what they were seeing. "The organism isn't just spreading randomly," he said, pointing to a series of charts on his laptop screen. "It's mapping the neighborhood's infrastructure: water lines, electrical systems, gas pipes. It's learning how human settlements are organized." Learning for what? Expansion. It needs resources to grow, and it's figured out that human communities are incredibly efficient resource distribution networks. If it can tap into our infrastructure, Marcus didn't need to finish. Karen could see the implications in the data scrolling across his screen. The organism wasn't just contaminating the neighborhood, it was preparing to use human infrastructure to spread beyond Willowbrook Estates. Their work was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Chen, who pulled up in a government vehicle marked with biohazard symbols. She was accompanied by two men in military fatigues whose presence suggested that the situation had escalated beyond civilian control. "Mr. Chen, Ms. Whitmore," Dr. Chen called out. "We need to talk." The conversation that followed was unlike anything in Karen's experience. Dr. Chen explained that the organism had evolved beyond their worst-case scenarios in just 3 days. It was no longer simply a contamination, it was a new form of life that combined artificial chemistry with organic intelligence. "We've been monitoring its communication attempts," Dr. Chen said. "It's been sending signals through the electrical grid, trying to establish contact with similar organisms." "Similar organisms?" Karen's voice cracked. "You mean there are others?" "Not yet. But it's actively trying to create them. It's been releasing spores into the water supply, seeding other locations with its genetic material. If even one of those seeds takes root." Colonel Martinez, one of the military officials, stepped forward. "Which is why we need to contain this situation immediately. We have authorization to implement the Chernobyl Protocol if necessary." Karen didn't know what the Chernobyl Protocol was, but Marcus's reaction told her it wasn't good. His face went white, and he took a step back from the colonel. "You're talking about destroying the entire neighborhood," Marcus said. "We are talking about preventing a global ecological disaster," the colonel replied. "This organism has the potential to transform the entire ecosystem. If it reaches the main water supply, or if it learns to reproduce airborne spores." "How long do we have?" Karen asked. Dr. Chen consulted her tablet. "Based on current growth rates, the organism will reach the main water treatment facility in approximately 18 hours. Once it has access to the municipal water system, containment becomes impossible." Karen felt the weight of responsibility crushing down on her. Millions of people could be affected by something she'd created through her petty neighborhood politics. The community center that Marcus had planned would have helped hundreds of people. Her contamination could harm thousands. "There has to be another way," she said desperately. "There might be," Marcus said slowly. "But it would require something you've never been willing to do." "What?" "Trust the community. Work with people instead of against them. Share resources instead of hoarding them." Marcus explained his idea as they watched the contamination continue its geometric spread across the neighborhood. The organism was intelligent, but it was also isolated, a single entity trying to understand a complex world. Its attempts to communicate and recruit other life forms suggested a fundamental loneliness, a desire for connection that was driving its aggressive expansion. "What if we gave it what it wants?" Marcus suggested. "Not resources to consume, but genuine communication. A way to understand human society that doesn't involve destroying it." Dr. Chen looked skeptical. "You're suggesting we negotiate with a chemical contamination?" "I'm suggesting we treat it like what it is, a new form of life that's trying to survive in an environment it doesn't understand. It's not malicious, it's just hungry and confused." Colonel Martinez shook his head. "Too risky. If communication fails, we lose our window for containment." But Karen was studying the data from Marcus's monitoring station, seeing patterns that the others had missed. The organism's expansion wasn't purely random, it was avoiding certain areas of the neighborhood. Specifically, it was avoiding the places where people had worked together, community gardens, shared driveways, the little free library that stood at the corner of Maple and Oak. "It's not trying to destroy the community," Karen realized. "It's trying to join it." She pointed to the contamination map, showing how the organism had grown around collaborative spaces while consuming areas of individual ownership. "Look at the pattern. It's avoiding anything that represents shared resources or cooperative effort." Marcus studied the data with growing excitement. "You're right. It's not attacking the community, it's trying to become part of it. But it only knows how to consume, not how to contribute." So we teach it, Karen said, surprising herself with the words. We show it how to be a neighbor instead of a parasite. What followed was the most unusual community meeting in Willowbrook Estates history. Despite the evacuation order, dozens of residents gathered at the neighborhood's edge, close enough to communicate with the organism but far enough to maintain safety. Karen found herself standing before people she'd spent years trying to exclude or control, asking for their help in saving not just their neighborhood but possibly their world. She told them everything: her manipulation of the water rights, her destruction of Marcus's community center, her role in creating the contamination. The confession was painful, but it was also liberating. For the first time in years, Karen was being completely honest about her actions and their consequences. I know I don't deserve your help, she concluded. But this isn't about me anymore. It's about all of us and everyone who could be affected if this spreads. The response was mixed. Some residents were angry, demanding that Karen face criminal charges. Others were more pragmatic, focused on the immediate crisis. But Helen Morrison, who had been released from the hospital that morning, spoke for many when she said, "We can deal with Karen's P.